Hello and welcome once again. This is To Infinite and Beyond, a Marvel Snap show by and for people who just love Marvel Snap. This is episode number 3. Today is Saturday, October 28th, and as always, I am Squash, and I am here once again with my main man, Jdeg. How you doing today, man?
It's been a while, Squash. I was kind of sad. We're moving our upload date to either Fridays or Saturdays now. So I'm excited for the new time. I feel like it'll be a lot better now. We can talk about OTAs. Right when they happen, and then we can also have a little more breathing time in terms of discussing a new card that just released, as well as talking about the upcoming card. While still giving people time to figure out what they want to do. So I'm really
Yeah,
happy with that.
yeah, we thought that this, like a later in the week upload date made more sense, and I think that there's more room for us to fill up that space, I think, because there was a lot of competition for pre-card release content. So now we can still do pre-card release stuff. Like as you can see, we're going to be discussing Werewolf by Night in this episode. A couple other things we're going to be discussing. Oh, that was a little slip up. We should be good. We'll be talking about Nico and Black Knight as well, going over the cards that have come out this month. We'll be talking about the OTA changes that happened on Thursday, which were ridiculously impactful, I would say. And we'll talk about decks we're playing like we pretty much always do. We'll be talking about the meta as we go. So let's go ahead and get this episode started by discussing the new card coming up on Tuesday, Werewolf by Night. How about you take this one?
Yeah, so Werewolf by Night is going to be a 3 cost, 3 power. After you play an on-reveal card at another location, move there and gain +2 power. So he's definitely going to be... I feel like he's pretty skill intensive. Honestly, we just had Nico too, and now we have another card where you have to plan ahead pretty well, because when he moves, he's not going to get power unless he moves along with it, right?
Yeah.
So, so you need to be able to plan to where you're not clogging yourself, but you're also making sure that Werewolf has space to move, and that you're playing your on reveals at different locations every time, because you don't want to play two at the same spot. That way, he's not getting the buff then, right? So I feel like there's a lot of brain power involved, and a lot of deck building power, in terms of figuring out how you're going to do it involved as well, right? So you've got to figure out what kind of on reveal packages are worth it, and then if the deck even wants like a 3 cost, maybe 7 power, 9 power meat stick, right? I should say you don't want him to just get 1 proc, because then he's just a worse Polaris that you have to think for, right?
Hmm.
So you definitely want to make him at least a 3/7 to make it worth your time. And even then, we've had Dakin come out, Dakin, however you want to say it. He was a 3/8 with a little bit of work involved, and he hasn't really been spectacular. So it's about thinking about what makes it worth it, and what decks are willing to kind of take off their turn 3 to play this.
Yeah, I will first say that I think Dakin is better than you're saying, but regardless of that, when I first saw this card, I was really excited for it because I thought that the power ceiling was just really high, so it would warrant building decks specifically around this effect, and you just get just a ginormous. Like, it's not unrealistic for this to be like a 3/11, you know what I mean? So that got me really excited, but then after seeing how the meta shook out this month, it's actually interesting that Werewolf by Night has a like kind of a really awkward anti-synergy with Elsa. And so it remains to be seen, I feel like, how this is going to fit into the meta. There is one archetype where I think he makes a ton of sense, and that is in Bounce. I believe that we have a... Well, we'll leave it on this one for now. We will have a Bounce theory craft in a minute, but I think the reason Bounce makes sense is because that archetype just naturally runs a lot of on reveals that are cheap, and you're going to be playing the on reveals over and over. And I think that it will be powerful to spend your turn 3 getting the werewolf in play, and then turn 4 you're doing like a 1 drop plus beast kind of thing. But even that is awkward because your 1 drop will move the werewolf there, and then the beast picks up the werewolf. You know what I mean? So there's weird stuff going on with that. But if you have like 0 cost Iceman and Nico or something in your hand, then you can do crazy pop offs with werewolf. So like you were saying, it's just like an extremely thinky card. I think it's going to be very hard
Yeah.
to maximize this, but I feel like the text box is so powerful that there's got to be somewhere where this guy makes sense.
I feel like it's one of those things. I have the most doubts on cards for October of Werewolf. I
Sure.
felt like Man Thing had, a nice meta niche in terms of its power, and it's going to get a little buff into November with a Nihilus coming out. Then also, I just knew that was going to be broken. I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
realize how broken it was going to be, but I knew it was going to be good. And then Nico, I felt like it was going to be a good card as long as you had a lot of cheap cards that you didn't mind like destroying or transforming. Werewolf, I feel like there's just so many different situations where he's going to let you down. Like that beast example, right? If you play that one drop and then you want to play the beast, that means that the werewolf isn't going to move. Or it means that you're going to be bouncing the werewolf and having to spend more energy on it, right? So I think that there are just a lot of different little ticky tack things that make it annoying to try and make werewolf worth it, right? I think that you could theoretically try and do like an only Falcon build, for example, right? To
Sure.
try into something like that. Maybe you add like a little Craven package with like Spider-Man and Ghost Spider, something like that, and see how that works. I think that could be something interesting. I don't know. This is just like the card that I'm least sure about, the one that I have my most doubts on. I could see it flopping. I could also just seeing it being a really good meat stick and being worth it, right? So
Yeah,
so
like for
no,
me,
go ahead.
yeah, I think it's the kind of card that unlike Nico and Elsa, you're not just going to be splashing this everywhere. You really have to build around this, which I think is similar to Black Knight and Man Thing. You forgot to mention Black Knight, which I think is a card that is powerful,
Oh
but
yeah.
like it's narrow, extremely narrow to a degree that like you're not seeing it that much. But I've seen plenty of people have success with it. I had success with it. I've just moved on to Nico stuff at this point in the month, but that doesn't mean I don't intend to revisit Black Knight at some point. But yeah, Werewolf, it's just gonna be, and even with the Craven idea, there's awkwardness with like you're gonna fill that lane up pretty quickly, and then it's just hard to get the Craven up that high. And but on the bright side, some of the cool stuff about Werewolf is that since he's moving around so much, you can dodge Shang-Chi or Shadow King pretty effectively with it. That relies on having Prio, but I feel like if you're playing I guess if you're playing a bounce deck, then bounce decks tend to be good at giving away Prio. So there's so many gameplay considerations with this card. I'm not even particularly like a bounce player myself. I have never been very good at those decks. So I could see myself trying it out and just like screwing myself over with some misplays and then just not playing that much werewolf anymore. But I still intend to get this card. I am one of those players that's in a spot where I can just generally get everything. Let's take a look at the theory craft that I put together. I was intending to also get a surfer list going, but when I was looking at it, like I'm just not sure that a surfer list is gonna make much sense. That is a card that has kind of fallen out of the meta pretty hard for, I think,
Yeah.
recently. But if you're building a bounce list, you go for the general Hood Bast game plan. I think Nico will definitely make sense there. I put in this Darkhawk package. I don't. It might not warrant a Darkhawk package, but just the general idea is that you're looking for in a werewolf deck is just cheap on reveals, obviously. So, and you're gonna want to make it so that you can flexibly clear up space on your board so werewolf can keep jumping around, which is where the Falcon is especially good. It's possible that Beast doesn't even make the cut eventually, but I think it's worth trying, especially with Mobius becoming quite a bit less popular recently after the Loki nerf. But I don't know. This is a direction that you would go. Just cheap on reveals. Obviously, I do want to try out Hawkeye. Have you tried Hawkeye that much ever since he got buffed?
Honestly, no. I don't think I've tried him once.
I think
I'm not
he's
gonna lie.
cool. He's cool,
Yeah, he's
man.
probably fine. No, I do want to say, so just some other ideas that I had floating around in my head while looking through on reveals. You've got Loki. They have a lot of on reveals. Almost half the deck is on reveals.
Okay.
And then you can add more if you want to, toss in like Nick Fury, even though that might be not be optimal. But
Hmm.
if you want to toss them in, those are some extra on reveals. I had some people talking about Destroy. You can play like Hulkbuster and Forge and your destroy stuff, and then the werewolf. I didn't think it was a good idea because destroy doesn't really want to spend their turn 3 playing werewolf, and they're already really full on slots. I feel like I'd rather just play Dakin.
Yeah,
And that.
yeah. Destroy already has like 12 slot syndrome. That sounds tough.
Yeah.
Even though like I see what they mean. There's a lot of on reveals in Destroy. That does make some sense.
Yeah, I think Hulkbuster is a nice little synergy with Werewolf because that way you don't have to worry so much about filling the lane, but you're still getting an on reveal, right?
Yeah, I like that.
But I don't believe in that deck. I just heard some ideas and I wanted to talk about it at least. I think Thanos could be something, if you kind of deck build it to have some more on reveals, you got your stones as well. Maybe that could be interesting. Maybe you have like Lockjaw and then like they play the Lockjaw, and if it comes out of Lockjaw, then you just play a stone somewhere else. I don't know. Maybe that just still messes with your Lockjaw lane because the werewolf then moves into the Lockjaw lane, and it's like now I got to play the stone somewhere else instead of the Lockjaw lane, and it's awkward. I don't know. There's just so many different things that it's like, oh, maybe it works here, but oh, maybe he fills my lane, and then I'm upset.
I do kind of like that Lockjaw idea. I haven't thought about that because, he'll move into the Lockjaw lane, but also you can move him back out of the Lockjaw lane, and Thanos has ways to flexibly make that happen. It's very sad that Soulstone no longer has the on-reveal on it, but obviously, as we have seen, Thanos is still viable right now regardless of that. But that is a pretty cool idea, and Thanos very reasonably can run stuff like Vision and whatnot too, which is really good with Lockjaw. Obviously, Lockjaw Thanos used to be like the king of the metagame before the Quinjet change. So there is precedent for that kind of archetype working out. But the biggest problem with Werewolf and Thanos, I think, is that, currently the way Thanos decks function mostly is like you want to be spending your turn 3 playing Psylocke or Timestone. So having that overlap is really awkward. I've even had Thanos decks where I was running Cosmo, and Cosmo had its moments for sure, but at the same time, it's like I don't really want 3 drops in my deck because of how these decks need to function right now, which is kind of like scam a lane and then play Eliath. So
yeah, one last idea that I had for you, Squash, was and also Eliath is kind of awkward with Werewolf. Maybe you don't want to move it. But one last idea that I had was like the Thor Miracle deck. You have your Yellow Jacket, your Jane Foster, and your Hit Monkey, all that stuff. So maybe you move around your werewolf instead of a bishop. I don't know. Maybe that's a good idea. Maybe that's a terrible idea. Who knows?
I mean, it is reasonable, yeah. And like the Mjolnir is another way to make the werewolf move. It's kind of, I've heard it described. I think it was someone on our server that described werewolf as like kind of another Hit Monkey, which is an interesting way. It's like a Hit Monkey that you pre-play instead of Hit Monkey that you play on turn 6. And cards that have an unpredictable amount of power and an unpredictable place where they end up have a lot of cube equity, I think, on average. Like, it's possible that you juke the crap out of somebody with Werewolf and you can just 8-cube people with it. Like, they just have no idea, like, especially in a Thor Miracle type of deck, like, the number of on-reveals that you can drop on the final turn is kind of crazy, and where the Werewolf ends up can be unpredictable. Actually, that sounds really good to me. that could be...
It does sound good, but my issue with it is, like, if you play the Mysterio curve, right, so you play your Mysterio Hit Monkey, your Zero, your Yellow Jacket, your Mjolnir, you have a lot of issues of clogging up each board.
Yeah.
And so if you clog up the board, then the werewolf doesn't move and get the buff, right? So that's another issue that you got to keep in mind. I feel like this is just, it's either going to be a flop or it's going to be the highest skill cap card of all time. Who knows?
That is possible. And I've been playing a lot of Mysterio Hit Monkey stuff. Like, maybe it's possible that we can just build the deck slightly differently so that clogging up lanes isn't as big of a problem. But, I can never imagine running Hit Monkey without Mysterio, so that's like a guarantee. It's just like the rest of the deck. Maybe there are other ways to do it that we'll come up with. I don't know. It's definitely worth exploring, because like we've said, the ceiling with this card is like extremely high for what you invest into it. And, maybe it even makes sense over Bishop in certain decks, which makes me a little bit sad because I got such an incredible Bishop split recently. Volmy Gold with Rainbow Crackle. But, it fulfills a similar thing as Bishop. I guess one thing it cannot do that Bishop is really good for is like sit in a location that's been locked down. Werewolf is not going to be getting you into the location that you can't play on turn 6. I think that's the vault, right?
The vault, Clint bar, stuff like that.
Yeah, so that's something that Werewolf cannot do that the Bishop can. So there's pros and cons like all over the place. It's a very interesting card to talk about, honestly, even though I'm skeptical about how much of an impact it'll make. So yeah. All right. Well, that's pretty much all we got on Werewolf. Let's talk about some of the cards that have come out in the past couple weeks. Black Knight. I don't think there's a whole lot to say. His best decks, I believe, were decks that combined his little package with Elsa. I have not tested those since the OTA. I'm not too sure about that anymore, but Black Knight is certainly a card that, like, when you get to do your stuff, he just kind of dumps on people. So it's a viable card. I do not think it's something that people need to be rushing out to get, but you can play him. He's just not really a big meta player right now. Did you end up getting the card? I can't remember.
I did. No, I need to get that Spotlight variant in December, so I
Oh, sure.
so I did. Yeah, I took I think three tries on it, 4 tries on it. I was a little sad about that, but whatever. I will say I think he's pretty good. He was definitely slept on. I should mention though that he is definitely like kind of streamlined into one specific build.
Yeah.
That you have to do. It can't be any kind of like mix or something. The most you can do is an Elsa package of good stuff, right?
Yeah.
And that was pre-OTA. We're gonna feature a deck later with it just to give people an idea. I do think that he's looking bad in stats just because people still haven't like really all been playing the same idea of going all in for big boys and you using your Ghost Rider instead of just tossing him in Hell a Miracle for no reason, right? So I do think that he's gonna be the victim of some bad deck builds. But once you build that specific build, I think he's pretty fine. The only issue is, then you're kind of stuck into only that build. And if you don't like that build, then too bad. That's the only way you're going to be able to play him reasonably, right?
Yeah, another problem for him is that Shang-Chi is coming back, I think, in the meta. I mean, not just I think. That's pretty for sure, I believe. And obviously, your 420 can get blown up. So stuff like that gives him issues. On the other hand, Nico, which dropped just this week, if you asked me what are my top 3 favorite cards in Snap, I think I have to put Nico in there. Like, she is just incredibly fun. The skill expression that she allows you to do is absolutely like off the chain, and it's just like an exciting card to draw. And I'm constantly doing awesome stuff with her. I don't know. How do you feel about her so far?
There's a lot of interesting things that you can do. One of my favorite things is that you can change the location of a place like deep space or nowhere where there's no on reveals, just because what she says is once you play your next card on that location, then it changes it. So you can change the location of somewhere that normally you wouldn't be able to, which is I thought that was super cool. That was like my first wow, Nico's so cool moment. It's also like when you play her into like I don't know, Mirror Island, and you give her plus power, and then you double her power the next turn. It's like, wow, I got an extra power. That's pretty cool. There's so many different things, and there's a lot of different like thinking involved, where you say like, oh, she can be a 1/2 that gives you next card plus 2 power. Is that worth it for you? Do you want like a better forge, or do you want to wait for something better? Do you want to wait for the demon transform? Do you want to wait for the draw? Do you really want like the move into the new lane if it's something that's hard to get into? There's so many like different things of thinking involved. You got to do calculations of like, okay, there's a X% chance that I'm going to get this one that I really want the next turn, but after that I might not have the energy to commit to her. So do I just play her right now, or do I play her late? Do I still hold on to her thinking that I'm going to get the option I want later, right? I think it's very interesting. You got she synergizes really well, I should say, with low energy cards. So you got your 0 cost, your 1 cost that you can kind of sacrifice, because she's got the 2 sacrifice options of the demon and the draw. and she's just really fun. I agree with you.
Yeah, I think also her spell that was slept on the most is the one where you copy the next card you play. That one, you can do bananas stuff with that. Having two copies of a card in Marvel Snap is often like you're breaking the rules, you know? Like, we've seen there are certain decks where if cloning Vats comes up, like, you're just kind of dead. And that's why, you know, that's one of the reasons why Nico is incredible in Destroy in particular. Obviously, not only is destroying something and drawing two cards is incredible, but the clone ability is arguably sometimes even better. I've had games where you know, you make a giant Carnage or a giant Venom and you copy it, and you just have so much power when that happens. So, build your own cloning Vats goes crazy. I had a game earlier today where the double you're on reveals. Why can't I think of that location name right now?
Armitage.
Yeah, Camartage was up, and my turn 4 was Nico Hitmonkey on Camartage. So I just put a 3/6 Hitmonkey in my hand, and that just unlocks so much stuff that I could have done on the ensuing turns. And then obviously I won that game. So I don't know, just stuff like that comes up all the time. I feel like the spells of hers that I'm playing the most often are definitely the clone one, and obviously cloning an Elsa. That's just stupid, and that's still worth it post nerf. Trust me. So the cloning, and then the destroy, and then the demon are the three most common that I use for sure. The better forge, I think, is usually only good if you're getting it on like your Deadpool or something. I tend to not play that one out in my Hitmonkey deck, which we will be highlighting here shortly. And then change the location and move to the right. Obviously, those have their moments, but usually you're not using those. But there are certainly games where, I don't know, like you can just surprise turn off a limbo, or, you know, get deep space turned off, which is always great. Stuff like that. She's just the best. Like, if you don't have this card, it is absolutely worth doing whatever you have to do to get Nico in your collection, in my opinion. She will continue to be a relevant piece of several different archetypes for a very long time, I think.
Yeah, I think it's really funny because, you know, her like worst scenario a lot of times, like, she can be a 1/4, and like, man, I want to settle for a 1/4. And it's like, Jesus, I'm trying to debate if I want to play a 1/4.
Right.
That's, you know, above rate 1/4. That's crazy to me, you know.
I think her stats were looking a little bit bad at first, and that was just a matter of people being a little bit too greedy with the card, I believe, because truly, like, you don't have to wait for the ultimate result from her that often. I think it's often good to just spend your mana in Marvel Snap, or energy, obviously. And, but there is moments where it is worth it to just pass and not play her, and figuring out the nuance of when to just play out your card versus this is a matchup or this is a board state where I need to be greedy with her is where a lot of the skill comes into play with Nico. And obviously, just memorizing the spells and knowing what can come up next versus what has come up so far. There's just so many intricacies, and it's been an incredibly rewarding card to try and master. So we could gush about her all day, but we have content to get to. So let's talk about the OTA changes. This was perhaps the most impactful OTA in the history of Snap. I think we could probably say that. Like, let's just start with the biggest ones. Elsa went from, she's still a 2/2, but now when you fill a lane, it gives the card +2 instead of +3. Now, I know you wanted to ask me, like, if you think these cards are still good. Elsa is still good. That is for sure. I don't think that she's the best card in the game anymore necessarily, but maybe she still is. But you're still going to see plenty of Elsa decks, that's for sure. What's great, though, is that it's not the only dang thing that I encounter anymore, at least for now. Loki, same text, he just went up to a 4/5. This one, I think, is a more significant nerf. I don't think I have even encountered a Loki since the OTA. What do you think of this one?
Actually, I felt pretty fine with Loki. I played a little bit of him after. I was looking through Twitter. I saw people still doing successfully with him. Nico is a great addition to the deck. I think it's honestly fine. It does hurt that you can't play like because usually I'm playing Loki on turn 4,
Yeah.
turn 5, and so I'm going some hand fillers on turn 3, maybe my bishop on turn 3, and then turn 4 I'm playing something along with Loki, right? So it does hurt that I can't play that card along with him now. But I think he's still fine, and he's got the meta wide open now with the Elsa Nerf, and people not playing Mobius as much. People jamming Shang-Chi in their deck, stuff like that. So I think Loki's fine. Elsa, I feel she's gonna do great. I just want to ask, do you think people are gonna be jamming like Nightcrawler Vision in every deck still, or do you think that's over now with the Elsa Nerf?
I think that you have to build around Elsa more now. Like it's she's less splashable, I will say. To bring it back to Loki for a second, what I really like about the change is that I feel like you have to build your deck around Loki more now rather than just like the way that Loki was starting to get built before was that you could just run a bunch of tech and your only card generation basically was like Maria Hill or yeah, Maria and Snowguard. But now I think you have to start pivoting a little bit more to get the Coulson back in. I've seen like Sentinel going back in, and I've also seen, which is really interesting to me, I've seen like some Loki Darkhawk hybrids with Zabu, and that's something I think is really neat to explore. Have you seen that? I think that might genuinely have some legs.
People are talking about Darkhawk, and I haven't seen it once, but I do get giddy just thinking about getting to play Darkhawk again. I like playing my Zabu list, so maybe there's something there. I could definitely see a little Loki. Maybe even throw in Nick Fury in there with the Zabu too. Who knows, right?
Well, and on
What
top,
do you think about like Quinjet? Because it got cut from Loki list right now. Do you think it kind of pops back in with the new builds?
it's a tough call. I'm surprised. I have seen lists that did not have the Quinjet. I feel like you want it if you're gonna play Coulson, but also maybe it's just fine to only play Coulson and Loki, just mainly for the purposes of like having a big Loki hand and for buffing Collector, which we might as well just mention now. The Collector got his recent nerf reverted, and he is back to being a 2/2. And I think that was a really nice, like elegant way for them to make this significant nerf to Loki, but keep him as a card that you can build around and make good decks with. Because now and that's reinforcing the idea that Loki decks have to build for Loki rather than just splashing Loki and then you're playing a bunch of tech otherwise. And that's how I want the deck to be built, personally. I think it's cool that way.
Yeah, I got a little sad seeing that like people were starting to cut Collector. That was crazy to me.
That was crazy.
They literally nerfed Collector for Loki, and then it's like, oh, well, now they're cutting Collector because they don't really need it. Right, so it's glad to see like it's now a staple, and you can also play it in like regular decks again. I ran into someone that was playing it in Bounce, and it got to like a 213.
That's
like,
awesome.
oh my god. Yeah, that was crazy to me. I was like, oh, I forgot that this was possible.
And I feel like
they dropped it, and I was so lost. I was like, what the heck?
I feel like Bounce can run Loki too now. Like you just because you're gonna run Nico and you can easily play like Maria, Snowguard, Bounce or something. So and the only Bounce card they were playing was probably Falcon, right? So I don't know. That's an interesting build to explore. I have seen decks like that. I just have not personally given them a shot. Some other stuff in the OTA, obviously an extremely impactful one, is the Angela nerf. She is now a 2/2 that only gets +1 when you play a card at her lane. So if you think about it, her ceiling is definitely lower. Like if you proc her 4 times, which is pretty typical, she is now a 2/6 when before the OTA she would have been a 2/8. And that is a significant change, but there are some aspects to it that I think aren't as bad as it seems. Like the floor of the card is lower. If you draw her late, she is more palatable to drop as a 2/2, and stuff like that matters. And I also still think that like you're hitting numbers with her that are high enough. Like you're well above rate when you get a 2/6. So I still think Angela is a powerful card, and that people may have overreacted a little bit to the nerf, even though it was impactful, certainly.
Yeah, I'm just a little sad. I was telling you earlier before we started recording, like, it just feels a little bit less satisfying to play Angela and,
Sure.
feel smart that you played, your Nightcrawler into that lane. That way you can get an extra proc on Angela. It's, the +2 power is like, wow, like, I feel so smart having done this versus the +1. I do think that, maybe she's not that bad. I do think she's gonna be dropping off though. I am sad because I wanted to see what she would have been like with the Elsa Nerf first, is what I would have said. I would have liked to see how she did, because the Elsa Nerf is huge for Angela as well, right?
For sure. And I think before Elsa came out, you were seeing quite a bit less Angela. Like people remember back in September, there were Loki decks where people were like, Angela is kind of not even that good in Loki, like there were just more important 2-drops to get down. So I do agree that like Elsa is what was making Angela so absurd this month. But I also see their mindset of like Angela has been a top card like literally since Marvel Snap came out. So it's like maybe time to tone it down a little bit while still keeping her relevant. And I think they reached a good spot with it. I think they're at a point now where they don't have to nerf Angela ever again, and she can just be this, and I think she'll be fine. Like it still feels real good to like plop your kitty there every turn, and she just keeps stacking up, and it just feels good still to me. So I'm into it. A couple other changes they made: the Sauron nerf, just -1 power. Okay, I guess.
I should say they talked about like in the team answers thing. It was actually just in the patch notes.
Right.
They're like, worry not, Sauron enjoyers, that there's some extra goodies coming for Sauron eventually. Nothing data mined, but maybe something cool coming up. But I thought that was the most interesting part
Sure.
of the nerf, but they were just talking about the future.
Yeah, I am excited for more cards that synergize with Sauron. That sounds enticing to me. Like we'll have to see what they come up with. But for now, Shuri Sauron, that's still a real good deck. So if you're into that kind of gameplay, have no fear. Your -1 power on Sauron did not kill the deck. The Uatu +1 power does not matter that much. The only deck I can imagine playing Uatu in is Galactus, and even that is there's probably a better card to put a slot in there for. But I guess it's cool that they keep giving this card attention.
Like no one's even tried him. Has anyone even tried Uatu?
I've seen it in Galactus, and that's it. And I guess it's okay.
Oh, really? I haven't tried him yet. Maybe he's not as bad, and we're just like overselling it. But maybe he's also just still trash. Who knows?
I refuse to believe. I'll need a really good player to try and sell me on it. Hellcow got +2 power. I actually think this is really nice. There is a discard list on untap.gg that is rocking Hellcow now. It's just like APOC discard with, pretty much all the typical stuff that you would expect, just Hellcow in there now. And there are situations where I think Hellcow and Blade on turn 5 is actually better than playing MODOK. And so that's pretty nice. And Hellcow just being, if you don't draw your MODOK, Hellcow can kind of be a backup plan that can, like, you're putting 8 power that's a gigantic unit. So that can really contest a lane while also getting your synergies going. I think it's a very good card, and APOC is a strong deck right now, and it was a meaningful buff.
Yeah, no, Hellcow's a house now.
Yeah.
Hellcow's definitely a house now. I remember, like, they just plopped it against me, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's so big.
Yeah.
I should say, it's kind of awkward, because, like, I wouldn't play the Hellcow on 4 for just that meaty 8 power, but then I have to worry about discarding my MODOK, and then I get kind of sad thinking about that. I'm like, should I play it or should I not play it? I think it's definitely a great nerf, great buff, I should say. I'm really glad that they made the change, and I'm happy to be able to play the card, though.
I still think, like, your ideal line is still dropping Dracula on turn 4, so I think you're still, like, fine. Like, Hellcow, like, you either play it on turn 4 if your hand has lined up, or you're playing him on turn 5 with Blade, I think is the best lines with Hellcow now. So it just kind of lines up, and that deck puts out a lot of consistent power. I'm a fan of that change.
Oh, Squash. I gotta ask. Do you think the collector discard kind of idea could ever come back with these buffs?
Maybe. That's something I would like to explore. Actually, it's really nice that they
Yeah.
reverted collector. Yeah, I really like collector discard. It's very fun to make a bunch of swarms. And Mobius
Hmm.
isn't quite as omnipresent now, so maybe there's something to look at there. Yeah, with Hellcow too. The final change of the OTA was the +2 power to Spectrum. So I was really hyped for this. I'm a fan of Spectrum. My first direction was Spectrum Thanos. Personally, I just think that the more meta Thanos builds are better than what Spectrum Thanos is doing. But there are a variety of builds. There's a lot of experimentation going on with Spectrum, and she is looking. There's some stuff out there that's looking good. Like a Zabu Darkhawk Man Thing brew that has Spectrum in it. There, I was seeing one with really good stats on Untap.gg. So there's some stuff to explore here. It's an awesome buff.
Yeah, I like the card. It's so fun. Honestly, Spectrum's a really fun card to play, so I'm really glad that she got some love. Because earlier it was just like I felt like I would rather just play Doctor Doom, and it would be a
Right.
lot less work and less worrying, right? Now it feels like I can actually point slam that 7 power, and it's like more impactful. That my biggest issue before with Spectrum was like I just add the 5 power, and it's like it just doesn't add that much to where I want to concentrate in one lane and then spread some to the others. Where Doctor Doom just made more sense beforehand, right? So I'm really glad with the change, and it makes me want to deck build. It's just fun. I like
Yep.
those cards.
Yeah, I think that this card very frequently now can hit like 615 worth of stats, which is what Doctor Doom is. That's kind of like the benchmark you want to be hitting. And anytime you're above that, it starts to get real juicy. And I've even seen a build recently that was trying out Wong. That sounds scary to me, but also if you successfully get the Wong off, I mean, that is so much power. I feel like that's the kind of deck people will retreat against if they realize what you're doing. So that's always a bummer, but other than that, Spectrum looking really nice right now. So very, very cool OTA changes. It's probably the biggest meta shift I have ever seen in Snap, and I have no clue what the best deck is. And anytime that is
Yeah.
the case, it feels really good to me.
No, Scott, I want to ask you, what do you think are the biggest winners and losers? Other than obviously these cards and their associated decks, what are the biggest winners and losers that I wouldn't think of immediately?
I'd say the biggest winner is anything that's trying to do stuff that Mobius was shutting down. So if Mobius becomes like 10% of the meta instead of 20% or something, that is a significant amount of the time where your Zabu or Sarah or Swarm or whatever, or maybe even Stature. Maybe we should be exploring Stature again. Any of those cards, that's the winner. The loser, I would have to say, that's a good question, actually. Probably just like the Elsa Loki decks that were just like tier 0. Uh,
Mhm.
that deck it got hit from like 3 different angles, and I don't think that deck is going to be tier 0 ever again. That's for sure. But it didn't lose so badly that it's like unviable now, which is why the OTA has been such a success so far. I think, like I've seen nothing
Yeah.
but like resounding positivity about the OTA. Um, but besides that, let's real quick go over some decks we're playing to wrap up the episode now. This one at the top, this is by far my favorite deck right now. I'm just loving it. It is a Hitmonkey Mysterio deck. It's running Wasp, Kitty Pryde, Bast, Nico, Angela, Elsa, Jeff, Mobius, Mysterio, Bishop, Hitmonkey, and Iron Man. So what this deck is aiming to do, obviously, is just like get an Elsa rolling, play your Bast if your hand lines up well and you're hitting it on Mysterio or Iron Man, or getting it on a Wasp is really nice. I love having a 0 cost card in any Nico deck because it's such a flexible little unit to turn into the destroy for 2 cards or turn it into a demon, stuff like that. Wasp is obviously just good on a Hitmonkey turn. It's good with Angela. It's good with Elsa. The Iron Man lets you go tall. The Kitty Pryde, obviously, just a really good card with Angela and Elsa and Bishop. I freaking love this deck. I've been crushing with it too, and the unpredictable turn 6 power spikes with Hitmonkey and all the little homies in here. It's just fantastic. I've been having a ton of success with it.
I really like it. I enjoy whenever I get to see your variant, Squash. I just want to say that. I love your Bishop and your Iron Man. I'm really jealous.
Yeah, my wallet isn't happy with it, but everything else about me loves it. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, and I'm excited. I think this is some kind of avenue that you can look into Werewolf, so I'd be excited to look into that as well.
Yeah, we would have to make some adjustments for sure to get more on reveals in here, but that is a direction for Werewolf that I had not considered, and I'm excited to explore it. The other deck I posted here is pretty much just like the standard Thanos deck with Nico. Extremely powerful deck. You really have a lot of lines to win games, and I get to show off my golden zombie Blue Marvel, which I am so happy with. Yeah, you've probably, anyone watching or listening has faced this deck, I'm sure. Watch out for Professor X on turn 4. If you feel like that could be coming, try to develop power in lanes where they're going to try and prof you. That is my biggest tip against this deck. You're definitely going to see it, and I think the popularity of this archetype is why Darkhawk is coming back, and that's just part of how this meta is cycling right now, and it's very exciting. I believe
Yes, Josh, I want to ask real quick, how do you feel about Iron Lad with Nico? I've seen some people kind of having debates on whether you should run Nico with Iron Lad, whether Iron Lad is the cut, or what are you going to do about that?
I mean, so when Iron Lad scans Nico, he still casts one of her spells. So just try to make sure Iron Lad is the last card you're playing on a turn anytime you're playing him, just so you can plan around the spell he might scan if he gets her. But I still think it's totally worth it, and it can still be an upside. Like, he can scan a good spell, and then you're just rolling. Like, and everything else in the deck is so insane with Iron Lad that it's just very hard for me to imagine cutting the card. Yeah, I think it's definitely worth it.
I agree with you.
Yeah,
I like that.
Very powerful card. I believe you had... Did you have a deck in here?
Oh, I guess it's not in there. I had a Black Knight deck that I was really excited to try. I just took it from Lambie series, so it's got if I can find it right now actually.
It's the Zabu stuff, right?
Yes, it's got the Zabu stuff in it. So it's got Black Knight, Blade, Zabu, Armor, Lady Sif, Dracula, Jubilee, Ghost Rider, America Chavez, Magneto, Giganto, and the Infinite. So this is a little different than the ones that you see right now. This is just because of the Elsa OTA. I feel like this might be a better avenue. Jubilee, I was excited to play Jubilee because I just got the Dan Hip Jubilee variant, so I'm excited to be able to use it.
Nice.
And it's pretty fun. I got the Dan Hip Infinite too, so I was excited to play this deck. And Black Knight can really pop off. I want to ask you, Squash, if you have a good Blade target on turn 1, but you don't have Black Knight, do you Blade immediately, or do you try and hope to get the Black Knight later?
I think if you have Ghost Rider in hand as well, it's probably just worth slamming it. But since that deck, you're not gonna be able to win if you don't do something busted. You know what I mean? With either Black Knight or Ghost Rider. So it's a pretty risky play to not wait if you don't have either the Ghost Rider or Black Knight lined up. So it might be worth passing.
Yeah, I think it's a fun deck. It's definitely some thought involved. At times, it can feel like you don't really get snap equity because, you show them your hand, you show them what you've discarded, they know what's coming.
Yeah.
Shang-Chi can still kind of mess you up if you haven't drawn your armor. So there's definitely some issues there, but I think it's a fun deck. I get to use my variant, so I'm happy to play it. My other deck was a Spectrum Thanos list, Squash, but this one I cooked up myself. This one has Ant-Man, Ghost, Nico Minoru, Mojo, Armor, Mobius, Jean Grey, Blue Marvel, Devil Dinosaur, Valkyrie, Spectrum, and Thanos. And you know how much I like playing Valkyrie in my Thanos list. And any list I can, I love playing Valkyrie. I will say, every game that I played, I won, except for when I played against Destroy and they had Killmonger. Killmonger absolutely destroyed you, and it's so depressing when they play Killmonger against you. If you can have your armor, but other than that, there's nothing you can do to protect the other lanes. I was thinking about playing Ghost, or not Ghost, Cosmo. Maybe that could be an interesting avenue.
Mm.
I don't know, but I like the Ghost kind of Valkyrie Spectrum package because, Spectrum likes all these one-cost ongoings, which is why Ant-Man is also so good. And then all these cards kind of lend themselves to Valkyrie. Valkyrie being good with them as well. The Ant-Man, the Ghost is really important. I feel whenever you're playing Valkyrie decks, I don't like playing Valkyrie if I don't have Ghost, just because I feel like I can't be proactive. Because you
Oh.
really don't want to have prio on 6 with Valkyrie. And Valkyrie was actually like the only way I was winning against destroy decks was, you Valk their Venom
Mm.
and it gets really small, and then their Taskmaster or Arnim Zola all of a sudden isn't that good for them. So I think it's great. I think it's fun deck. I like playing all the ongoing. Spectrum is so fun to me with Thanos. I also got a golden blue Marvel, so I'm really happy with it. So I'm just excited to be able to play Spectrum Thanos, and any Thanos build I'm always excited to be able to play.
Yeah, I mean, I sign off on 10 of the 12 cards that you included. I am a documented Valkyrie hater, so that's the only issue that I have. I truly think that card is just bad. But I'm glad that you were hitting Venoms with it. She's obviously a card that has her moments. My problem is just like over a large sample size, I just feel like she sits in my hand a little too much doing nothing. So that's my only issue with it, but it is cool that the Spectrum buff has unlocked some stuff. And that's all we can ask for out of every OTA. I really hope that they continue to ship these like really cool buffs. Like I'm pretty much always on board for these. And yeah, Marvel Snap, it's just kind of kicking ass right now, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm.
And we're wrapping up a really cool month. And next week we'll be talking about Ms. Marvel, right? That's the new
Oh man,
the
and
season pass
I
card.
still think the card is absolutely broken. You might not think so, but I think she's a 4-cost Doctor Doom
I think that's gonna
that you can
be
do ongoing.
that's gonna be a really fun debate that we can have next week.
I
All right.
can't wait for it. It's gonna be 40 minutes of us talking about Miss Marvel.
I love it. And we are at 47 minutes right now, so I think that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you everybody for watching. We have a new upload schedule, so we're going to probably be Friday or Saturday every week. And To Infinite and Beyond is going to keep on rolling. So thank you everybody. That's going to do it for us today. And we'll see you guys next time. Well,
What happened?
I still think it was a good episode.
Also, I'm excited because we might have a guest in the next podcast.